with your name on it. Bombs, rockets, bullets. The soldier lives in a permanent hail of hot, twisted metal. And the only thing standing between him and certain death is his body armor.
It felt like somebody kind of teed up with a sledgehammer and just took me right off my feet.
Get locked and loaded as we go back through generations of technology to discover how body armor became the last line of defense.
3, 2, 1.
It's time to go ballistic. Body armor. For today's soldier, it's the difference between life and death. Changing threats and changing weapons mean it's always evolving, and dragon skin is the latest off the block. Lighter, tougher, more flexible and more durable than the competition, this dragon can take plenty of fire and still come back for more.
Initially, I thought I was dead. I knew I'd been shot, and I was like, wow, this isn't good.
A combination of hard, highly advanced ballistic composites and soft ballistic fibers, dragon skin's fish-like ceramic discs create an ultra-tough exterior. It flexes and molds to the body, allowing maximum mobility while stopping high-velocity, armor-piercing rounds. Now, Weaponology will unlock its family tree, going back through generations of technology to reveal how steel plate, cotton, and Kevlar have evolved into the most advanced body armor system on the planet, dragon skin. The story of armor can be traced back to the 15th century, when European blacksmiths learned how to forge sheet steel. This achievement led to an evolutionary high point in rigid body armor, a world of medieval knights with full metal jackets. They are the pioneers of body armor.
When people think about knights in armor in the Middle Ages, they tend to think of knights in full plate armor. They actually only came in right at the very twilight of the period, because the limitation was in making large plates of steel. Early iron-producing processes could only produce small sheets of steel. So the Romans had their lorica segmentata with thin plates.
You take a series of simple strips of metal, easily forged by even the dimmest blacksmith, and then you bend them into a rough shape and allow them to ride each on the next, so that a blow against a lorica segmentata is distributed widely so that it becomes harmless.
By 1450, Italian armorers found a way of making large plates of steel. They were able to build steel suits, protecting the knight from head to toe.
Plate armor gets its strength from the shape. If I take this as a flat piece of 16-gauge steel, if I put it on these blocks and stand on it, then I think, yeah, it will just bend very easily. It's quite flimsy. This is exactly the same gauge of steel, exactly the same dimensions, but I've hammered it out, I've domed it out as an armorer would. And now I think we'll find it's a lot stronger. It actually will take my entire weight.
But steel in itself wasn't enough. Many knights added an extra layer of soft, padded protection beneath.
If you imagine putting a sheet of metal on your arm and hitting it hard with a sword, that is still going to hurt your arm. So you have to have a thick layer of padding on the garment underneath that absorbs the blunt trauma.
Hundreds of years later, the knights in their hard, rigid armor had left the battlefield, but padded protection hadn't. The Roaring 30s. Prohibition, gambling, and gangsters. Mob hits had become part of everyday life, and if you wanted to survive, you'd need more than a gun.
As late as the 1920s and 30s, American gangsters were using this principle of multiple layers of padding to protect them. They made bulletproof vests out of multi-layers of silk. And that could slow the bullets of the handguns of the day. Any bullet traveling up to 1,000 feet per second was slowed enough not to cause mortal injury. In fact, it directly led to Smith & Wesson developing the .357 Magnum.
As a marketing ploy, Smith & Wesson said, this is the gun that takes the proof out of bulletproof.
Downtown shootouts, drive-bys. Chicago was covered in gun smoke. In the end, a vicious murder would lead to the invention of an entirely new form of body armor. In 1893, the mayor of Chicago, Carter Harrison, was shot in cold blood in his own armchair, wiped out by gangsters. Chicagoans were shocked. Something had to be done. What it took was some divine inspiration.
This is the parish where Brother Casimir Zeglin invented the bulletproof vest.
Casimir Zeglin was a priest at St. Stanislaus Church, Chicago. Shocked by Mayor Harrison's death, he set off on a divine mission to create a bulletproof vest. For 15 years, he experimented. Steel shavings, hair, and moss were all included in his cloth designs. Nothing worked. But then he tried silk. Silk is stronger than steel and has the ability to stretch 30% longer than its original length without breaking. A spider's web hit by an insect will absorb and displace the kinetic energy. Zeglin applied this principle to bullets. But the problem was to find the right weave. Only when Zeglin visited the great silk weaving mills in Europe did he find a technique to produce the perfect 4-ply weave.
He came back to Chicago, he wove this silk together into the cloth and invented the vest.
Determined to prove the effectiveness of his invention to the skeptical residents of Chicago, he came up with the ultimate demonstration.
He believed so strongly in what he did that he went to a Chicago theater and demonstrated. He wore the vest.
As the crowd watched, an associate, Ashley Weber, pointed a gun at Father Zeglin.
Fired a shot. It didn't penetrate. The vest withstood the bullet. He certainly believed in what he was doing, and again, I suspect that he deep down in the inner sanctum of his soul, he felt that this was his call from God, and he was going to put his name to this. This was his vocation, so you know, God wouldn't let him down.
Zeglin's soft bulletproof vest was a massive breakthrough, but it was no quick fix for soldiers on the battlefield. In 1914, a Zeglin vest could cost as much as $800, almost $15,000 in today's money. The result? In World War I, body armor was limited to just a few elite troops.
Military men are traditional types. They're reluctant to let go of old ideas. And the French are still putting in 12 regiments of cuirassiers, people who are wearing the back and breast cuirass and the helmet that was worn by their regiment in the Napoleonic Wars.
Some German elite troops also wore body armor, but it was too heavy, not protective enough, and slowed them down.
It was right out of Napoleon. And I'm not going to wear something like that because if you got shot with anything, it was going to go right through it. It was just the dumbest idea that you've ever seen in your life. And when they got them in the trenches, it just didn't work either.
Armies had effectively abandoned body armor, and soldiers were paying the price. To find out why, we have to return to the age of the knight. Many historians believe that armored knights vanished when guns exploded onto the battlefield. The logic? That bullets and shrapnel could penetrate the old steel suits, making them useless.
There's a huge misconception that firearms killed off the knight in armor. Armor was not killed off when the knight was killed off. It's only in the 18th century that you start to see armies going on with no body armor at all. The knight, however, does go at the end of the Middle Ages. But he didn't go because of firearms. Firearms have been around for 100 years by then. And to be a knight, you needed to be wealthy. To put yourself in the battlefield, you need several war horses, like a Grand Prix driver with his pit stop crew. And it was economics more than anything else, and social change that killed off the knight.
On the battlefield, expensive metallic suits were replaced by cheap, brightly colored uniforms. This gave soldiers a form of protection. Battles were chaotic, mistakes were made, and if you couldn't tell who was on your side, you risked getting shot by your own men. But bright colors also attracted the enemy, and with the arrival of accurate rifles, it invited trouble.
Warfare is now starting to be conducted at a greater distance because of the technology of weapons, which for the first time allowed rifles to be used on the battlefield. So there starts to become an advantage in not being seen too clearly.
By the Civil War, dull colors were in. Greens, grays, khakis. Survival on the battlefield was about staying concealed. But in World War I, there was nowhere to hide. Bullets and shrapnel caused millions of casualties. The only protection soldiers had was their helmets. And even then, some armies didn't like the idea of using them.
By 1914, most armies considered the helmet to be an emblem of cowardice and to kill offensive spirit.
War is geared to offense. Firepower is everything. But what happens when the rounds are incoming? You're going to need a good defense. And that's what armor does for the soldier. Helmets are a critical part of his protective system. Everywhere the soldier goes, his helmet goes with him. But at the start of the 20th century, armies thought helmets were a sign of weakness.
By 1914, most armies didn't even like the idea of wearing helmets. Not helmets that are going to stop or deflect a bullet. The army considered the helmet to be an emblem of cowardice and to kill offensive spirit.
But armies decided they had to offer some protection. The British equipped their troops with the Brodie, the Americans with the Doughboy.
This is the style of helmet that the British and Americans wore. And it's positively medieval. This was the type of helmet that was worn in the Middle Ages by archers.
You'll notice the shape of the helmet is very flat. And the reason for that is it's not to protect against rifle bullets being fired from the front. It is to protect the head and shoulders and neck from shrapnel balls or shell fragments that are fired up in the air and explode.
Concerned about troop losses, the Germans came up with an innovative helmet design that rapidly reduced the number of head wounds being suffered in the trenches.
They adopted in 1916 the Stahlhelm, steel helmet. And as you can see, it's also known as the coal scuttle helmet because of its shape.
German designers take on the idea of building a helmet that gives full peripheral vision, but still maximum protection to the head. In order to do this, you take a bucket that comes down far enough to protect the occipital lobe at the back of the head, and then you cut away all the parts where you want to be able to see. The result is the Stahlhelm.
The Stahlhelm was one of a number of helmet designs that emerged on the battlefield.
Bashford Dean was the curator of arms and armor at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And he was a classicist. He dealt with Greek and Roman helmets and that sort of thing. But he was contracted by the American government to design helmets during the First World War. And one of the helmets he came up with was this. And it's positively Greek in style. And it's a very, very good helmet indeed. A couple of problems with it, however. One, it looks very similar to the German helmet of the period, and here's the German helmet. And the other problem with it is that once you had this on, you could not see, nor could you hear very well.
Go, go, go! But 70 years later, the German design was back in fashion. The reason? Soldiers need to see around themselves on the battlefield.
When the United States decides to get rid of their old washing bowl helmet in the 1980s and get a more protective helmet made of Kevlar, they use the same kind of methodology. The U.S. Army says we want to cover the maximum amount of the head and we want to cut away enough so that you can see.
Helmets have evolved. Different needs, different shapes. And in the 21st century, they face new challenges.
We're not facing someone who's shooting at us quite near as much. What we're facing is IEDs, improvised explosive devices, suicide bombers in vehicles. And so that threat is no longer the bullet, but it is blast forces.
The pressure is on. If body armor doesn't adapt to the new danger, an attack could end in tragedy. The modern U.S. combat helmet is good at stopping bullets, but it has one major flaw.
This original helmet has what's called a web suspension system, which keeps your head from contacting the Kevlar. It has a single 2-point chin strap, but frankly, it's not real comfortable, and it's not very stable. It can wiggle around a lot, up and down, side to side, left and right.
Hey, let's go! Hey, their vehicle's on fire!
Medics from all of the services complain about the fact that when they run up to a troop and they've got this helmet on, they run up, and what do they do to take care of someone? They lean forward, and the helmet will slide down into their eyes, so to take care of someone, they take the helmet off. Now they're uncovered. We upgraded the helmet, and that upgrade system consists of a 4-point chin strap. The second part that we provide is a padded suspension system, and there are 7 pads that go into this helmet. I can hit this helmet really, really hard, and I am not hurt. If I were to sustain a 200G impact with this helmet, you're going to the hospital, you're not going to be feeling well for a while. There have been cases where someone should have survived an impact injury. Turns out that they didn't because the helmet itself, it becomes the killing instrument. With this helmet, with the pad suspension system in it, that same hit generates 78 Gs through to the brain. That's a mild to no injury zone.
Since 2004, Mark Metter's charity, Operation Helmet, has shipped over 30,000 helmets to soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq. Comfort and safety. The modern helmet delivers both. In the 20th century, a new breed of maverick inventors would try to apply these principles to body armor. Their motivation? Soldiers put their lives on the line. So should we.
3, 2, 1.
Soldiers do one of the hardest jobs in the world. A bad day at the office could be your last day at the office. And 9 times out of 10, it's not mail that's incoming. It's why soldiers the world over rely on their body armor. During World War II, a new type of bulletproof jacket hit the battlefield, the flak vest. Flaks combined ballistic nylon and hard steel plates. They were too heavy to be issued to mobile infantry troops. Instead, they got issued to flyboys, protecting the crew from flying debris and shrapnel thrown by anti-aircraft guns, known as flak.
In 1943, the United States Army Air Forces adopted a flak jacket, meant to protect the torso from fragments in all directions, and it also would have an additional groin plate here underneath, and it's very heavy.
In Korea and Vietnam, the jackets were reinvented for general combat use. Manufacturers ditched the old heavy steel plates and opted for a lighter design incorporating multiple layers of dense nylon. Body armor slowly became as much a part of the soldier's kit as his rifle. And like his rifle, it was a love-hate relationship.
It was heavy, it was hot, and the temperature could go to 120 in the sun. But when the temperature got down to about 40 degrees, and it would up in the mountains, you could wrap up in the thing and keep warm.
Not that soldiers in Vietnam needed heat. They lived under fire and touched down in hot LZs. Tested to the limit, they soon found out how far they could trust their armor.
A flak vest is good for fragmentation, like out of a hand grenade. But it is not good for being shot. It's not a bulletproof vest.
Flak vests weren't enough. Soldiers were dying. A revolution was needed, and in the 1960s, it happened. Lightweight, ultra-tough, bullet-stopping Kevlar. The world has always been gripped by concerns about renewable oil supplies. But panic at the pump isn't a new phenomenon. In the 1960s, chemical giant DuPont was trying to invent an ultralight tire to make cars more fuel efficient. Bright young chemist Stephanie Kwolek was working on the project.
We started out with the intention of making a very strong and a very stiff fiber, but we also wanted something light to save on gasoline.
In her laboratory, Stephanie and her team experimented with nylon-based chemicals. Mixing up her formula, she spun a fiber that turned out much stronger than expected. Was it a blip or a major discovery? She had to be sure before she told her bosses.
I didn't want to be embarrassed, to be frank. And so I checked it out several times. And when they always came back the same numbers and so forth, I knew then and there that this was the fiber of the future.
Stephanie's discovery would become the biggest brand name in personal armor, Kevlar. A fiber with a strength-to-weight ratio 5 times greater than steel.
Nylon has a very flexible chain, and it's sort of like cooked spaghetti. Now here, I have uncooked spaghetti. This is what Kevlar might look like, or like logs that float down a river. In order for you to get more logs into that stream, they have to line up parallel to each other. And this is the identifying mark of rod-like polymers like Kevlar. Very strong and very stiff.
The combined strength and flexibility of the new fiber gave it several applications. But the most obvious was body armor. Could this be the ultimate bullet stopper?
In delivering higher ballistic performance in a vest, I need the right fiber, I need the right structure, I need the right number of layers. And Kevlar brand fiber delivers all of those attributes.
Kevlar's potential led other inventors to use it in body armor. Men like Richard Davis. Richard is one of the most successful manufacturers of body armor in the 20th century.
Okay, camera people. 3, 2, 1.
Time and time again, he's put bullets where his mouth is to prove the value of his vests.
I think it's
201 times have been shot total. But that's like, you know, asking a 63-year-old professional boxer how many fights he's had.
Richard's fascination with body armor goes back nearly 4 decades. On July 15, 1969, the world was watching Apollo 11 as it blasted off to land the first men on the moon. Meanwhile, in downtown Detroit, Richard Davis was a humble pizza delivery boy. Others followed every step of the Apollo mission, but Richard hit the pavement with another stack of boxes. It was a night that would end in tragedy.
The night after Apollo 11 blasted off of the moon, the next night I had to do some blasting on my own. I came up to a house and there's nobody home. And I heard somebody around the side of the house. And I had a piece of sort of here like this, and I had the .22 revolver in my waistband here. So I said, did you guys order pizza? And they said, yeah, bring it around back. I'm still hoping this time that these guys are gonna hand me 10 bucks and I can handle the pizza and that'll be the end of it. There's 3 guys standing in sort of V formation. I was probably about 5 or 6 feet away from them. And all I did is look at this guy with his nickel-plated automatic looking right square in my face. Didn't look at him, didn't look at his friends, looking right at his hands. Keeps the gun leveled right at me. Just look at his hand. And then his hand just started to tighten around the gun. And I knew that was it.
(1969), downtown Detroit. Richard Davis, a pizza delivery boy, is staring down the barrel of a gun. It's a fight he's ready for.
I had to shoot him in the head. Hit him in the chin somewhere and came inside his jaw, came out his ear. Second one was about an inch off his heart. Third shot was a little bit too fast, and the fourth shot hit the second guy. He just turned around like this immediately. Now he still has his hands back here, so I didn't know if he was going to come up empty-handed or if he's going to come around, he's got a gun. Hit him right dead center of the spine, right there. Bullet lodged between the 2 vertebrae right behind his heart. He went face down in the concrete.
In a brave act of self-defense, Richard wiped out one of Detroit's most feared gangs. Shocked by the ordeal, the pizza boy began cooking up a plan.
My goal then was just to deliver pizza and make an honest living in Detroit after dark. Silly me. What I realized then was that policemen are out there getting killed all the time.
Richard realized there was a real need for body armor and began developing concealable vests that could be worn 24 hours a day.
My idea was designed that you're going to give up the really high-powered rounds, you're going to give up side coverage, and all the way down to the groin and knees and everything. You have to give that up. We're just going to cover the critical kill zone. We're going to stop most of the bullets most of the time for most of the people.
First, he used ballistic nylon in his vests. But then, Stephanie Kwolek discovered Kevlar.
If body armor was aviation, Stephanie's the person who invented the jet engine. And I didn't invent body armor either. The nicest thing somebody once said about me, compare me to if body armor was automobiles, I'm not the German guy named Otto who invented the first motor car. I'm Henry Ford. I made this stuff practical and mass-produced that guys could actually buy it and work the thing and it would actually work, and work in real life.
Body armor gives officers the second chance that criminals won't. Today's vests can catch bullets traveling more than twice the speed of sound, and they make it look simple. But how do they do it? Like all great designs, modern vests are deceptively complex. Unless, of course, you've grown up with a father who has shot himself over 200 times in the name of self-protection. Matt Davis now runs the family business, although his father is never far from the scene.
Excuse me, I can't do it. It ain't worth it, Matt. It ain't worth it.
Three,
go ahead.
2, 1.
Oh,
This vest here is a ballistic vest worn by law enforcement. And as you can see, it's very easy to put on. Typically, it's worn underneath the officer's uniform. It's got side straps here and also shoulder straps in the front. It also has a pocket here in which we can insert additional ballistic plates for added trauma protection over the heart.
At an awesome speed of nearly 1,500 feet per second, Matt's bullet blasts into the vest.
When the bullet impacts the vest, energy is transferred throughout the pad, so it really sends a shock wave throughout the pad. The energy that doesn't go into the pad goes into the person's body. That's where the trauma comes from. So that's where the bruising and that type of effect takes place. So we had a really good impact there. And as I peel this back, you'll be able to see the impact on the clay. You'll notice there's a slight bit of rupturing to the back side of the armor, which is a good sign. Nothing too serious there. And the depth of the cavity is fairly shallow. When I bring this out, you can see that we've got about 34 millimeters of blunt trauma. That's very acceptable. And the officer could expect to see some serious bruising, but nothing more than that. Normally the bullet, as soon as it hits the pad, it begins to mushroom and deform. And that's really when the ballistic fibers can really start taking effect, because they're getting more surface energy to grab and to try to grab that bullet and stop it.
Since Richard invented concealable body armor, it has saved the lives of more than 3,000 cops who are alive today to tell their story.
Oh my God, I've been shot. First thing I did was reach back to make sure there was no blood or I wasn't feeling anything wet. And I didn't feel anything, so I said, okay, I'm okay. But the vest definitely saved my life.
The doctors later told me that had I not been wearing the vest, the bullet would have ruptured my aorta and I would have bled out in about 2 minutes.
In May 2005, Officer Bill Bergantino from the Old Saybrook Police Department in Connecticut found himself in a brutal shootout. He was asked to a local hotel where a guest refused to leave. Bergantino went into the room to check him out.
I'm looking around the room and I immediately see a bunch of syringes, needles, and drug paraphernalia on the bed. Went over, got his identification, which he had on him. My dispatcher ran him and let me know that he was wanted. My senses were right off the bat that he was going to fight. Just felt like something wasn't going to go right. Detective Sergeant Heine, who was my initial responding backup, he arrived. The perpetrator got up and actually had taken a couple steps towards the very corner of the bed, and he says, well, let's end this now, you're dead. The suspect fired one shot, which grazed Detective Sergeant Heine in the head. I had just cleared the doorway when I got shot in the back. It felt like a big wallop. I didn't really feel pain. I knew that I got hit, and I knew that I couldn't get hit again. He was shooting at me. I fired, I'm not sure how many shots.
Bergantino proved that a cop should wear body armor at all times. He survived and was able to save Detective Heine's life, who had appeared on the scene without body armor. For his brave actions, Bergantino was commended as one of America's top 10 officers in 2005. Officer Bergantino took a bullet and lived to tell the story. But not everyone is that brave or that lucky. Survival on the streets and the battlefield is a lottery.
As you can see, it's gone all the way through the Kevlar. It's gone through the front and through the back.
Body armor has revolutionized the battlefield. In the 21st century, there are less casualties and a lot of lucky people walking around.
The round struck right here. It's a little hole, but it hurt a lot.
But armor only works if you get hit in the right place. It doesn't cover the whole body. In June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of the massive Austro-Hungarian Empire visited Sarajevo, wearing one of Kazimir Zeglin's bulletproof vests.
Just prior to the First World War, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria was riding in an open car, and he had a bulletproof vest on. The problem was the guy that shot him in the neck. If you're going to wear a bulletproof vest, make sure the other guy shoots you in the chest.
Ferdinand's death triggered World War I. Zeglin's vest didn't stop the bullet, and it didn't stop the war. The truth is, body armor doesn't come with a money-back guarantee. It's got limitations.
Bulletproof vests have never really been bulletproof. And when the bulletproof vest is introduced, it is a marketing term. The idea is you tell some VIP who is afraid that the anarchists are going to come and assassinate him, that all he's got to do is pay you a great deal of money for your patented bulletproof vest, and his life is now safe. That idea is strong. The idea that the bulletproof vest is going to stop a bullet is weak.
No body armor is absolutely perfect. Every body armor ever made since ancient Babylonia can be penetrated. And if you know how to make a body armor that can't be penetrated, please God, tell me.
The same is true of helmets. They give soldiers confidence. But how effective are they?
First, we're going to try a 9mm pistol round on 2 helmets, an M1 from World War II and a United States Kevlar. Well, I'd say he has quite a headache, but it didn't penetrate. The Kevlar also did not penetrate to the inside.
The bigger dent in the older helmet poses a real risk of brain damage. While the M1 did not give the best protection, it did have its advantages.
As you see here, then you can actually use this as a foot bath or to cook soup and this type of thing in if you have to. And soldiers weren't supposed to do that because heat or fire underneath would lose the temper or weaken the steel, but they would do it anyway.
Shooting the helmets with a heavy caliber rifle has a devastating result.
Next, we're going to try an 8mm Mauser from World War II. As you can see, it's gone all the way through one side and all the way through the back. With the Kevlar, it's gone through the front and through the back.
Even the modern Kevlar didn't withstand a 60-year-old rifle. The wrong gun, the wrong angle, the wrong distance, and you're dead.
Since the helmet doesn't protect from rifle fire or close-fired pistol bullets, you might ask, why wear a helmet?
I think the wearing of body armor does make a psychological difference. It doesn't make soldiers feel invulnerable because there are bits of them which aren't covered, but it does make a difference.
Soldiers are deeply superstitious. In combat, some men get a reputation for being lucky. Bullets go around them. Bombs drop behind them. These men are bulletproof.
Across history, people have often tried to persuade their soldiers that they were bulletproof. Sometimes this has been done by extreme forms of religion, sometimes it's been done by magic. Sometimes, in a sense, military training has tried to persuade people that fire doesn't really matter, that you can impose yourself so effectively on the enemy that you can brush aside their fire and it really won't kill you.
Going back to ancient times almost, they get their men all hopped up on drugs or alcohol or whatever they got. Well, they're getting bullets or spears or arrows through them. And they just keep coming and coming and coming.
For these men, there is no pain and no fear. Their thoughts are closed off to the possibility of death. But modern soldiers want modern body armor. They can't rely on mind games. They want physical protection, the best they can get. For the American infantry, that means interceptor vests. Weighing 16 pounds, the outer layer of the interceptor is lined with finely woven Kevlar, 35 layers. Inside, 2 ceramic plates stopping high-velocity rifle rounds. It's an effective system, if you get hit in the right spot. June 2nd, 2005, Baghdad. Specialist Steven Schitterer is standing by his Humvee. What he doesn't know is that 75 yards away, he's being targeted by an Iraqi sniper.
This is my vest. The round struck right here. It's a little hole, but it hurt a lot. Came through and opened up and hit my plate, which is behind this. That's where the bullet stopped, thankfully.
Steven's life was saved by Kevlar, a bullet-busting ceramic plate, and the sniper's inexperience. A shot to the head, neck, or even lower body could have left Steven dead. But instead, incredibly, he popped right back up.
Got up, quick look, didn't see anything. Got some cover behind my Humvee. I saw this one van that just stood out. It was the only thing down there, so it just didn't seem right. I started calling my other guys, hey, go down this road, go down this road. They take off in the van. We put down a warning shot, trying to get them to stop. They didn't stop. The two individuals inside then got out of their vehicle, and it was a foot chase from there. We ended up searching about 8 homes following this blood trail.
His patrol eventually found the wounded sniper in a residential backyard. Steven, a combat medic, found himself bandaging up the man who moments before had tried to kill him.
That was my job. There's no excuse not to. Doesn't matter who they are. If they're hurt, they need help.
Steven had saved the Iraqi's life, and his interceptor vest had saved his.
If I didn't have my vest on, that round would have killed me. No question about it. The impact was directly over my heart. As soon as I hit the ground, I would have been dead.
Schitterer is one of the lucky ones. A few inches can prove the difference between staying alive or coming home in a body bag. But with each evolution in armor, the soldier's chances improve. Dragon Skin is one of the latest and best. The first flexible armor that can stop rifle fire. It flexes and molds to the contours of the body, making it ideal for special forces and police tactical units. It's not cheap, but in the 21st century, life has a greater value.
Once upon a time, you couldn't afford to give everybody armor. Now, you've got to give everybody armor. If you don't, there'll be a sense that there's a difference between those who are armored and those who aren't. And no Western democracy making war at the beginning of the 21st century can get away with not giving its soldiers the best armored protection available.
Today's soldiers wear body armor that truly is the sum of its parts. Drawn together, the branches of its family tree reflect its unique genesis.